Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. Whilst I'm waiting for my other panelists that you can already see on screen up here, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge what we've just heard from Nikki as well, because I'm acutely aware that this session is quite technical, and it's just very important to kind of keep in mind why we are doing this and why we're working on some of these quite technical, quite practice-specific things. It is to improve outcomes for the children and families we work with. So that's, yeah, fantastic to hear that perspective and kind of keep that in mind. So I'm just waiting for everyone else to come in. I think I'm just waiting for Kamaljit. If you want to come on screen as well. We've got Becky, we've got Sophie. We're going to do a full list of introductions in a minute. Before we do that, just very briefly, I wanted to set the scene as to what this session is about, because it's a long title, Shaping the Market and Using Independent Social Work Assessments at the Right Time. So the reason we speak about this today is because independent social work assessments in terms of timeliness and their quality have been raised by several areas that we've worked with as part of the Trailblazer program as a challenge. Cheshire and Merseyside have made it the focus of their Trailblazer. And I know that in central London, the area has also grappled with this issue and trying to find solutions to this. And I think it's also a very timely conversation given the recently proposed ban on unregulated experts in family courts. So really good to be speaking about this today. Very briefly in terms of housekeeping, we're going to try and ensure that we have 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. And with that said, I think it's time for proper introductions. So my name is Yvonne Reinhardt. I'm a coach and senior consultant at Mutual Ventures, and I've been working with Cheshire and Merseyside, as well as Surrey DFJ area as part of this Trailblazer. I'm handing over. Becky, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Becky Brown. I'm the service manager for the Cheshire and Merseyside Assessment Hub.
Sophie.
Hi everybody, I'm Sophie Baker. I'm the project lead for the Central London DFJ Trailblazer.
And we've got Kamaljit. Kamaljit, we can't hear you. You might be on mute.
Hi, it's Kamaljit Birdi from Royal Borough of Greenwich Children's Services.
Brilliant. Good to have you. I can't see your face at the minute, Kamaljit, but let's hope we can see you in a minute. That would be really good to have that properly on screen. With that then, if we can go to the next slide, please, just to give a quick overview of the session today. So we're going to talk about common challenges around independent social worker assessments. We're then going to speak specifically about the Cheshire and Merseyside Assessment Hub, and then we're going to go to Central London, who are also looking at some options around this topic. So with that, I will hand over to Kamaljit. I know you're going to talk us through some of the challenges that you've identified in Central London. We still can't see your face, sadly, but hopefully...
I'm not sure why you can't see my... I'm not sure why you can't see my camera. It's switched on. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah. So is the first slide on?
If we can go to the next slide, please. Brilliant, thanks.
Okay, so obviously we required to take a number of different assessments within different stages within our child protection work, within the court proceedings, within our child in need plans, but most, I mean, within the 12 local authorities that we were working together in the Trailblazer project, we identified the fact that different local authorities have different plans in terms of how they undertake assessments. Some local authorities have their own in-house assessors, whereas other local authorities don't, and kind of rely on independent social workers or independent assessors. Yeah. So with the help of the Trailblazer project, we've been able to train a number of parent assess social workers and extern, which we can use instead of the extern experts, but due to their own work commitments, we often have difficulties in allowing them to take additional work to do the independent assessments and have to sort of recruit, look out for agency or independent social workers to do the assessments. And in doing so, we obviously we have a number of other issues that we have to deal with the independent social workers. Firstly, being the fact that we are not able to be aware of who actually is quality assuring those reports, who isn't, whereas within in-house ones, you're able to undertake quality assuring your own assessments that are being undertaken. So you have at least some input into what's been addressed and how it's been addressed. You are getting what you are looking for. But with some of I'm not saying that they're not all good independent social workers out there, but there are often experiences that we do have there whereby we do not get what we are looking for from within the assessments. And as a result of that, we often have the experience of having delays in the assessments being completed, where we have our own independent social worker, our own social workers, we are able to at least ensure that we are completing the reports within a timely manner and addressing the issues we require, and obviously reducing the risks of having any addendum reports as a result of not covering what is not already addressed in the reports. And linked to the fact that there is a delay in assessments being completed, we are likely to experience things like delay in filing evidence in court, making care plans for families, and also looking at support that we require for families. The other issue we do experience is the fact that there are sometimes unrealistic expectations from the independent social workers in terms of what support should be provided to the family and the children. And that's probably because of the fact they probably not be aware of the local resources that are available within the local authority that they are undertaking the assessments for. Whereas in-house ones, we can actually do that. We are aware of the services that can be offered. So that's obviously the delay in any assessments being completed is also going to be resulting in delays in the court timetables and final hearings, and obviously further delay in children having the outcomes they required within the required timescales and sticking to the 26 weeks timescales that are required within the court process. We do have, we have obviously the fact that we have problems within the court arena as well, whereby sometimes the assessments undertaken by the social workers within the local authorities are not always recognized or given the weight they need to be given. And that could be as a result of parents objecting to the fact that they are not happy with having the social workers or the local authority undertaking assessments and want independent assessments. So as a result, to ensure that they are not biased in some way, in terms of the local authority is not biased, they are totally independent and are able to sort of feel, I think the parents feel more reassured about that. And I think, it's positive the fact that the courts are recognizing the fact that in-house social workers are also experts and experienced enough to be undertaking these assessments. So that's very positive, the fact that that's being recognized. And we need to be sort of paying more weight to that and consider, do we really always need somebody independent, or is it somebody else within the local authority who can do it, or the social worker who's already working with the family? Yeah. I'm moving on to the next thing, which is the confidence of the social workers, just keeping in time, and providing evidence in court. Giving evidence for no matter how experienced you are is always a very difficult experience or anxiety-provoking event in court for anyone. One, you are under scrutiny against, the judge, the CAFCAS officers, the solicitors, the parents. So it's quite a difficult situation for anyone. But it's important for our social workers to sort of be feeling confident about their work, knowing their families. They are the experts. They do know the family. They are sometimes working the longest with the family. than any other expert who comes and undertakes assessments of those children or families. They see them more often, more than anybody else. The social workers often complain about the fact that they are not able, they don't feel confident enough in giving evidence sometimes because they're worried about how they are going to be listened, whether they're going to be listened to, is their evidence going to be given weight or not, or whether they are going to have the experts going to be listened to more than they are. They always worry about that. That's always always very anxious about that. But it's important. And I think, again, through the Trailblazer project, we have been able to provide a lot of training to social workers in terms of building confidence in giving evidence. So, if they know their case well, they can give the evidence. They need preparation time as to how they give evidence has also helped. And the training how to give evidence is also helping them to build that confidence. And I think the regular support from their legal team as well is also very helpful in terms of making them comfortable in giving the evidence required. Yeah. We are often obviously having the difficulties of having addendum reports being asked for within courts. We already do a number of assessments within pre-proceedings to avoid any delay within the court proceedings. But by having these additional assessments, we are obviously going to have the issues around delay in making plans for the children. Again, that sort of links into the fact that the court time, we lose the court time. We run out of time scales of making sure that we are making plans for children within their time scales, kind of a thing, and not just doing addendum reports unnecessarily. It really is important for us. Yeah, I'm running out of time. I think
Yeah.
racing.
Sorry, Kavati. Yeah, that was really helpful overview. Apologies. I will have to move us on just so we have time to cover the remaining bits as well, but that was really helpful. Thank you. So with that in mind, I think some of these challenges will resonate with people, and please use the Q&A function if you feel like that's the same in your area or something. Something that you don't agree with or that you're not seeing and you have questions about, please do submit those and we'll cover those at the end. But in the interest of time, Becky, do you want to run through how you've been addressing some of these challenges in Cheshire and Merseyside, please? And can we go to the next slide, please?
Yeah, thank you. And we can probably go to the next slide still. So yeah, we'd undertaken some audit activity, solution finding sessions when being part of this Trailblazer project. And I just want to echo what Kamaljit said around, there's excellent practice in agency workers. I've seen excellent practice and independent assessors. So, this is not blanketing all of those workers, but in our audit activity we did find that a factor in delay was timeliness in the assessments being completed by independent social workers, and also the variable quality, and that was leading to delay in Cheshire and Merseyside. And it also highlighted late presentation of family members as being a challenge. So this is where the idea around the Cheshire and Merseyside Assessment Hub being developed. So it was the idea of actually just developing our own independent assessment hub, essentially, but where we'd be focusing not on all types of assessment, but on parenting assessments and kinship assessments, with parenting assessments utilising the Parent Assess model, because we're really conscious that that's a really successful model that's been driven forward. So that's the thought behind the development of our own hub. And on the next slide, I'm just going to go through how that looked. Thank you very much. So the model, we've got 9 authorities across Cheshire and Merseyside. And the original idea was to have a social worker released from each authority to then just solely work in this hub on parenting assessments and kinship assessments. So it made me think about it when Nikki was talking about, the demands. She was so conscious that workload is so high, and the change of social workers impacting on, the quality of practice. So this is why these assessors, they were released from their authorities, they were still hosted and still employed by them, but only undertaking these assessments. So they wouldn't have all of the other elements of a caseload that can mean sometimes it's difficult to complete assessments timely and to have that intense work with the families to ensure that quality of assessment. So in terms of the timeliness element, our assessors were completing the assessments between 2 and 4 weeks shorter than is typically instructed. And we did have conversations with Parent Assess and fostering teams to make sure that we were realistic on those timeframes, that we weren't compromising what's realistic and fair for family members, particularly those with learning needs that do need repetition. So we did make sure that we had those conversations when agreeing the timescales, which I'll talk about in a sec. The other part of this module, so we had the assessors that were completing these assessments, and then there was myself as service manager, and I undertook the quality assurance of all the assessments prior to them being filed, again, to make sure we had that quality element. You can see our little tagline on my background: quality, timely, independent. So it was really important that I had that oversight. I undertook assessment reviews every 2 weeks with the assessors to make sure we were really unpicking and reflecting on work, and making sure that we were having that real depth to the assessment. So that was the model. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So there was a big emphasis on how we would maintain independence, understandably. So the way that we did that was that the assessors, although released from their authorities, they didn't complete assessments for their own authorities. So, for example, a Wirral assessor would complete an assessment for Knowsley. Cheshire West assessor might complete an assessment for Sefton, and so on and so forth. So we had maintained independence in that way. And we were also conscious about having an independent place to record. So where we're going to have all night, or it was 4 assessors in the end, but where we're going to have the assessors record so that it's independent, not on their own systems. So we instructed, or we commissioned, Charms. So it was a central place for everyone to record, but they were restricted to accessing only the families that they were working with. So they couldn't see any other families. So that worked well. Next slide, please. In terms of the referral criteria and eligibility, so it was only court proceedings. So I know some of the other Trailblazer areas focused on pre-proceedings, but we were only working with court proceedings for this pilot. It could absolutely be expanded to include pre-proceedings, but ours was focused on court proceedings. And parenting assessments, the eligibility was around those assessments where there's been a gap in evidence, it's been challenged, there's not been enough analysis. That tended to be the rationale for needing another assessment. And fostering was more around when there'd already been an assessment and, it's been negative, but that's been contested and it's felt that there needs to be another assessment. And also that sort of late presentation of family members that we mentioned. So those were predominantly the assessments and the referrals that we then accepted. If we can move on. So I mentioned about timescales. So I do need to reiterate again that these timescales were only possible because the assessors were only completing this work, not having work with other families within authorities. They were, it was really intense work with these families. So parenting assessments we completed within 8 weeks. Fostering, the viability assessments we completed within 2, and full fostering SGO assessments within 10 weeks. And these were inclusive of the quality assurance process. So as I say, we did have a lot of thought into how realistic this was, and they were the timeframes that we gave, but I think was the privilege of only completing these assessments that we could do that. So I think the next slide Thank you. It's just around some of those barriers that some of these are not going to be a surprise to people, around the completing the assessments within the timeframes that we set. So I'm just going to briefly outline some of those challenges and how we then overcame them within this hub model. So again, yeah, DBS and medical checks. This was a common theme across all 9 authorities around, you can have the best intention of completing assessments within timeframes for court. But if the DBS and medical check isn't coming back, your hands are tied. So what we did in the hub to try and counteract this challenge, we built links with the fostering team. So I had conversations and meetings with fostering teams, panel chairs in all 9 authorities to be able to almost be pre-armed with information around the templates, the processes, because obviously they're different in different areas. We had a named link worker for each authority. So it meant that when we were instructed, we could straight away contact the individual fostering link worker to be able to start those statutory checks as soon as possible, as well as the hub assessors looking at, checking ID at the initial visit to try and prevent that delay. We also collated information from all 9 areas around medical advisor details, specialist dog assessors, and panel dates, again, to streamline that process that sometimes can be a bit clunky in the system for independent assessments. The one thing we were really interested in hopefully piloting had we had longer was exploring the possibility of having a consultant GP because of the length of time it can take for the medical checks to come through. So there'd be initially sort of a higher cost, but with the view of reducing cost further down the line and also the delays. So that's definitely something we would have wanted to have done, as well as completing the DBS checks in-house. So with Parent Assess, some of the delays and challenges were around the need for a full 8 weeks. So we might have had conversations saying, okay, these are the timeframes that we can complete, but we needed to have the 8 weeks following the letter of instruction and bundle being received, because it just wouldn't have been fair on family members to have eaten into that time. So that's something that we had to be really clear on, that we can complete it within 8 weeks, but from the point of us receiving that letter of instruction. And another element of the audit activity initially was around family members feeling able to work with professionals and sometimes them not feeling able to. And again, Nikki mentioned, not attending court hearings for understandable reasons. So one of the things that we've done is complete 1-page profiles for all of our assessors, which is just a bit of an easy read, picture of the assessor, a bit about them to make them more human, and about what the difference in the hub worker. So we'd send those out to all the family members prior to an assessment being completed. So they're just some of the challenges and how we overcame them. So moving on to the next slide.
Becky, if I can give you a 2-minute warning because we're running slightly over, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. So this is really brief anyway. This is just basically how we did the referral process. So we just went from, if the eligibility criteria is met, I tended to have phone conversations with managers, solicitors. Once it was then agreed, it did need to be court ordered and agreed by a judge. And then the letter of instruction and court bundle would be sent to myself. A worker would be allocated within 24 hours, and we would set those time frames and have the deadline for filing agreed. And so just on to the final slide, I think it is for me. You'll be pleased to know, Yvonne. Just in terms of how we, how we managed the hub and the mobilisation during this pilot. So we did have governance meetings to get the input of the governance group and to provide updates. And we had monthly meetings with the authorities who released a worker. And we also had developed feedback surveys from for professionals and family members. And just really quickly, that I haven't added in, but we are now at a point where we've completed since December 12 independent assessments, and 100% of the feedback has been really positive from both family members, males, carers, mothers, solicitors, guardians. all of the feedback has been really positive, that they've been really detailed, thorough assessments, they've been timely, it's prevented the need for some of the hearings to be re-timetabled, and in one situation the local authority has changed their view on removing a 5-year-old from their mother. So it's been a short period of time to trial this model, but it's highlighted that it really can work, and there is a need for independent assessments, especially when there's been breakdown in relationships in authorities. That's where it's really worked. And so, as I say, you could broaden the scope to pre-proceedings and different types of assessments. And there's other ways of being able to tackle this issue, which Sophie is now going to talk about.
Brilliant, thanks, Becky. And just to say quickly, we've already seen some questions pop up in the Q&A, which is great. So if you have questions for Becky, feel free to type them out now. Sophie, if we can keep it to 5 minutes, just potentially, that'd be great. So we have a little bit of time left for Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Cool. I'll do my best. So I work with Kamaljit in the Central London Trailblazer. So in Central London, we've been evaluating options to improve assessments through joint delivery and through commissioning approaches across the 12 local authorities in our family court area. And these options cover all types of assessments, so not just the social work assessments that are required in pre-proceedings and proceedings in response to all the challenges that Kamaljit just described. A key deliverable of our project was to develop a business case evaluating these options. And this is actually being presented to our steering group, which is our governance group for the project, tomorrow, for a decision on what we take forward together. So I think if you've got the slide with all the different models on it, nice one, thanks. So we've identified 2 main models to address these challenges of how we can jointly commission or deliver assessments differently. And these are a shared resource hub, which is kind of very much what Becky's just described for Cheshire and Merseyside. That would be one of the options. And then a joint commissioning approach. And for each of those models, we have 4 options that we've identified and developed in our discussions. It's really important to note here that these aren't, it's not either or, they're not discrete alternatives here, these options. I very much see them, want them to be treated as building blocks, so you can have like a combination of a handful of those depending on the local need and the priorities. And that's kind of what we're going to be getting into tomorrow in our steering group discussions. Many local authorities of the 12 boroughs that we are in Central London, we all reported sort of similar challenges for different types of assessments across the piece. But as there were so many different problem pressures, resources and practice models, it meant that, you know, some local authorities are more exposed to certain challenges than others. So we really aren't looking for a one-size-fits-all solution here. Instead, we've come up with these options that will help some local authorities deal with some of the challenges. And I'm really keen to advocate for an iterative approach to test and learn in a really like safe to fail kind of way going forward, so we get the model right that works for us. We've assessed these options against questions such as, obviously, how would they work? How would they add value? What would they cost? And would they save money? Since Becky has run us through a shared resource hub in Cheshire and Merseyside and that model, I think I'm just going to run through the options around joint commissioning as a kind of complement to the shared resource hub. The rationale for focusing on joint commissioning was really informed by our local discussions and analysis that included findings such as external providers will really always play a role, some kind of role in expert assessments. Currently, most services or most assessments are spot purchased. And while this works kind of well enough, our local conversations really revealed 3 main challenges around the quality of provision, or actually like the tools or mechanisms to ensure the quality is really good. Finding available experts quickly, as we've heard, and then value for money. So particularly around negotiating better prices and more transparent standards for costing across the 12 boroughs. And we really identified that these challenges require a more strategic approach and the use of different commissioning tools or contract formats that create like the foundations for a different kind of relationship with the providers out there or the assessors out there. And we really believe that working together has three main benefits around economies of scale, market shaping power. So like new ways of working will hopefully require, making change amongst external providers and assessors in a way that they perhaps aren't used to at the moment, but that by working together and teaming up across the local authorities, we can create much greater incentives for change in the market. And then also lots of opportunities there for learning from each other as well. So like pooling that commissioning, not just the kind of financial side of things, but that commissioning expertise and providing a real nice like commissioning lens on how assessments are delivered. Just to tell you a little bit more about the options within the joint commissioning model.
We have like 1 or 2 minutes, Sophie, and we have to run into questions. That's
so we've got, no worries. So we've got joint block contracts, which you'll be familiar with that term, obviously. For us, we think having a block contract could potentially help reserve capacity for Central London and improve quality management. So quite a straightforward way of building that into a contract. We think this could be tested and incorporating a sort of clearing mechanism for void capacity in a way to sort of mitigate that. Framework and dynamic purchasing systems, kind of like umbrella contracts, you might know them as. I think this will be, this could work in terms of having multiple providers on the frameworks or multiple assessors. I don't personally think these are going to be that suitable for the scale of the market that we have out there for assessors. But I think there might be a small but kind of significant opportunity actually to improve existing residential frameworks through more contract or greater and more richer contract management support. We've got an accreditation scheme / associate model as our third option there. That accreditation scheme is likely to be more suitable for parenting assessments, I believe, where finding quality providers is the main challenge, so for the independent social work market. And that associate model, we came across that in the kind of model that Cafcass uses for its associates, so kind of similar like contractual arrangements underpinning that. And then the final option is around commissioning other public sector or voluntary community sector providers. So thinking of how we can more creatively like team up with the NHS to use like existing contracts and levers, or creating something new and bespoke that might be hosted by one of the mental health trusts in our area that all our local authorities can tap into. Obviously that has real benefits of specialisation and resilience. And would likely be looking like it'd probably be cost neutral there, whilst driving up that quality. So yeah, with all the options, the devil is definitely going to be in the detail of the contracting and the process design. Lots of work to do with developing the market, I think. But I do believe that our local authorities would benefit from pooling their commissioning expertise and experience. So we'll see what decision we come to shortly locally.
Brilliant, Sophie. Thank you. That sounds really interesting, and we're keen to hear what comes of this. I can see Becky has been an absolute star and already answered quite a few of the questions on the Q&A panel, which is fantastic. You also just answered Ian's question. I would have gone to that next. So if everybody wants to have a quick look at that, just in summary, there were a couple of questions around kind of experience of social workers. So that was minimum 5 years. We were talking about kind of how many assessments people were working on. So Becky, you said that was 3 max. And then just a couple more around kind of how long it took to set up the hub. We went live in November, Becky, is what you're saying. And yeah, we only had 4 social workers. Becky, do you want to maybe take a couple of minutes to talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's probably, it's an easier one to say as opposed to type on that one. So absolutely, completely valid questions. So there was some delay in us starting the project, you know, getting off the ground really in Cheshire and Merseyside. So I was recruited into the post of service manager in September. So that's when it was then my role to sort of take the bid and make it happen essentially, and, you know, start the recruitment of the assessors. So with that, with the funding initially only being until March 31st, it's obviously a small amount of time for people to make that decision to leave their posts for what would then be around 6 months. So the criteria as well was that we weren't accepting agency staff at that point. You know, the model was that it needed to be experienced staff, and for some authorities that was more difficult. There was a much smaller pool of experienced staff because of local challenges. So, you know, there was just a short amount of time to have those expression of interests. So we did make the decision to go ahead with the smaller model of 4, because had we not, and we'd gone back out with expression of interest, with the length of time for people to, you know, leave their current roles and have backfill, and those you know, children having to be reallocated, it would have meant there were, you know, we were asking people to leave for a matter of a couple of months. So we decided to just make a start and trial it with the smaller number, which actually, you know, I know that there might have, you know, that might not have felt great for all of the authorities, but actually it enabled us to trial this model, you know, as I say, on a smaller scale. So it's still, we still managed to make it work, but those were the reasons why it was a bit of a struggle at first to recruit the full 9. If we had longer, then we would have gone back out to authorities
Yeah.
and had longer for the expression of interest.
Yeah, and that's the challenge of having quite a time-limited program, isn't it?
Yeah.
That here we had 12 months for implementation that included all that recruitment at the start, which was not straightforward, and definitely something we can all learn from. We have a comment as well around kind of cognitive assessments, holding things up sometimes in court. And these can have a big impact on timescales. Do you have any thoughts and advice on this? I know we spoke at it, Becky, before you joined, and it was kind of out of scope just because of what we were able to do within this year. But yeah, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, and I think it was Paul in Telford who said about, you know, they've got their own team of parent assess trained practitioners as well as psychologists, and I think that is a really great idea. And you're right, Yvonne. I think that when Gemma, who was fabulous at you know, starting this project, I think that was the idea, that how brilliant to have people who are, you know, psychologists doing cognitive assessments and other type of assessments, other psychological assessments within the hub. But like you say, I think just with the constraints of this particular project and the short timeframes, that wasn't going to be able to be prioritised. But I absolutely think, again, if we had another year, then it would be brilliant to have, you know, again, widen it up to pre-proceedings, widen it up to other types of assessment, including cognitive assessment, have those links with, you know, having consultant GPs. I think you could do, you know, have an array of different types of professionals. And again, I think that probably would help address that you would know that you're getting the quality psychologist and cognitive assessments, and that you'd have them within the timeframes that are needed.
Yeah, agreed. And then, conscious of time, we have 2 minutes, but just one thing that came up, one of our kind of guests has says that in their borough they have an in-house parenting assessment team, which is quite well received. And just to say on that, I think Becky, well, we talked about this as well, knowing that it does happen in other areas. So it will largely depend on kind of judicial leadership as well. So I think in Cheshire and Merseyside, there were concerns around independence, rightfully, and kind of an important issue that was kind of worked into this hub, which is why it was kind of set up independently. But I know that in other areas, the kind of complete setup is just different in terms of how independence within local authorities is also perceived when there are different separate teams set up that don't work with others. So if you have any final thoughts on that, Becky.
Yeah, I just think it's a really good idea, and I do appreciate the, you know, the thoughts around the fact that, is it completely independent if they're still sat within the authority? In my experience of even this short period of time being across, you know, this hub, I do think that some of the reasons why it's really effective to still have someone independent, and by that just meaning someone different to having worked with the family before, is that there can be those breakdown in relationships that then does lead to what's seen as avoidance with parents, and and sometimes we're having to make decisions because we don't actually, and we don't know the actual risks and level of harm. And so I do think there's a benefit of just having someone that is separate from the everyday work with the family, to be able to have that sort of fresh pair of eyes and be able to build that relationship. So I do think those in-house teams are a really good idea. And just the last thing, because I can see the time, but is that I've spoken to some authorities where they were saying that some challenge in, they have people trained up in Parent Assess, because again, all the Trailblazer areas have promoted that, but that sometimes it is due to capacity that they then still can't get the people trained to undertake the assessments. So there's also that possibility of offering honorarium payments to those who are trained up as an additional incentive when they are being asked to complete assessments of family members alongside quite high caseloads. I'm finished, don't worry. Thank you,
Brilliant.
everyone.
That was fantastic, Becky, and I think that great to have all these questions answered, and also thank you to you, Sophie and Kamaljit. That was really informative, really great. So we are going to go into a break actually next. So thank you very much for our panelists, and whoever wants to come to the next session, that will start promptly at 2:20. So please do come in a couple minutes early just to make sure you don't miss the start of that. So thank you very much to all of you.